So, without further ado, I would like to open the floor to anyone who would be willing to go first. I'm just asking you to walk us through the article, basically walk us through the paper that you turned in or that you will be turning in. So, you don't have to have like slides or anything like that. And mostly just so we get an idea, of how it went, and these are always good platforms to fuel discussions. So, did I hear somebody who was willing and able to go first? Kimberly, okay, great.
Do you have like a time limit? Like Michael used to only want us to talk for X amount of minutes.
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5 people. We have 2 hours technically. So, if you wanted to talk for 10 minutes, I think that would be fine. Give us some time for the
entire time, Kimberly.
Or yeah, if you'd like to take over 120 minutes, that's also fine.
I really want to know everything about your paper, Kim.
Read it very, very slowly.
We are a captive audience.
Okay. I'm my other computer. I'm trying to read it off my other computer, my paper. I guess so. You just want me to go through the article, like I don't have to go like what I typed in my paper.
Yeah, just go through the article. Like, what was the give us the summary. What were the main points? What was the argument that the authors made? How did they support that argument?
Okay.
Why did you choose it?
Okay. So this one was successful collaboration for essential traits of effective special education specialists. And I chose this one mainly based on personal stuff that's going on in my building and kind of through our district. And so when I was kind of glancing through it, it was just a couple pieces really spoke to me. So the author of this focuses on 4 traits that are the skills that you need to be able to, as a special education teacher, collaborate well. And while the article was focusing on the connection between special education teachers and gen ed, as I read through this, it really just applied to anybody. It could be an admin with their staff. It could be anybody. It's just really good traits for anybody to have in order to be able to collaborate well.
Right.
So the 4 different key areas that was thoughtfulness of understanding, knowledge of policies and best teaching practices, compassionate in attitude, and then well-developed leadership skills. So they kind of go over the definition of collaboration, so I'm skipping over that.
Okay. Did they provide definitions of those 4 skills, of those 4 traits?
They do. So the first page talks about the purpose of collaboration and they define it. And then it goes into, it says the 4 essential traits, and then it literally breaks down every single trait and specifically talks about how, when they're talking about thoughtfulness, what aspects of being thoughtful are important. So,
article.
What?
I almost
did you do the same one?
I did not, but I almost did.
You almost did. It was actually really good, to the point where I'm I wish I could anonymously put it in people's boxes, but they all know what classes I'm taking right now, so it wouldn't be so anonymous. So the first one that they talk about is thoughtfulness.
Thoughtfulness, okay. Very broad concept.
It does. So they're all super broad, but when you start reading it, they've really narrowed that down into a specific step. Okay, honey, I'm talking right now, though. Okay, I'm sorry. My daughter has a pumpkin carving contest tomorrow, and so she's Googling pictures over here. Sorry. Okay. So under thoughtfulness, they talk about self-understanding and authentic reflection. So you're thinking about your personal self.
Right.
And really knowing that as a teacher, that critical self-reflection is super important. And one of the things that they mentioned is that the longer someone's been teaching, so even if they've been teaching gen ed for a certain number of years and then they switch,
right,
that critical reflection is harder, even if you've been teaching for that 15 plus years. When you switch different roles, that little window is really difficult to actually critically reflect sometimes.
So like the transition, like the point just after the transition is what they're talking about?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. But, and then in general, obviously, if you've only been teaching for a couple of years, to critically self-reflect is very difficult for people.
Right.
But that in order to do that, it helps you to understand, obviously, your strengths and your needs that you have. And that knowing those, you can then push beyond your own limits and then be able to communicate those with other staff members. And because even though, and I kind of related it to myself, even though I did gen ed for a while, so I can self-reflect and be like, this is completely different than gen ed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point in time where I was like, God, I wish I could go back and apologize to some of those SPED teachers that I worked with in the past. But also just the simple fact that, I lost my train of thought for a second. I lost my train of thought.
You're talking about your self-reflection after you made the transition.
Oh, yeah. So there's pieces where like, when I struggle to self-reflect right now, like I called up my school psych, and she's coming to our building tomorrow. I said, listen, I'm struggling with this. I have tried every single approach, and I need your help. Mm-hmm. Like, I know this isn't a strength of mine, and I'm working on it. What can you sit down and like problem solve like this communication issue, this barrier I'm having with another new teacher who's a great teacher, but he's new, and so he's struggling. And then I'm like trying to like, that's not really how SPED works, and this is what really needs to happen. And so that little piece. So she's going to sit down with me. So that was like that self-reflection going, okay, I need help here because I'm not getting.
You communicate what your professional perspective is to this individual to help him become more successful.
Right.
You've learned.
And so it's like, I'm trying to do that. And I have this knowledge, which is another piece that they talk about, is being thoughtful about how you, as a SPED teacher, with having the knowledge base that we have, which is in some cases a lot more, to not be like, vomit all this information on these people. Like we're like this huge knowledge base and we're right and you're wrong. So it's also having that thoughtfulness of personality and how we each respond to different things and our experiences in life. So
we're really getting in the train of mindfulness here, right? Being aware.
Yes. And so they don't ever use, what's interesting, this was written in 2010. So kind of around the time that mindfulness kind of was coming around. So they don't really use that word, but that kind of came across in it. Yeah.
Right.
And then the other piece under thoughtfulness was when you're making decisions, especially, and I don't know if it's just my school, and it'd be kind of interesting to know just across the board. One of the pieces that they talk about under thoughtfulness is making thoughtful and purposeful planning choices. So when you do this, to use reason and logic, which can be hard because there's that emotional piece. Right. And sometimes it's the teachers, sometimes it's the parents, sometimes it's the kids, and sometimes it's actually the special ed teacher who has certain perspectives and experiences in their life that kind of gives them like a barrier. And so to go through with reason and logic. And so having to be able to find that balance when you're collaborating with all these different people, but still come through with reason and logic and have to try and set that emotional piece aside and be really thoughtful about everybody who's there and all their different emotions, because some of them can't take the emotion out.
Right. I think maybe a lot of us sometimes aren't even aware of the fact that it's emotion that's kind of communicating.
Right. And actually I had another conversation, interestingly, with my and I'm
going to hold my fingers up to give you a countdown, okay?
Okay. 4 minutes. Okay. So I had an interesting conversation with my school site, and it came down to she actually said, I think it's a struggle for me when I have to diagnose kids or we're looking at emotionally disturbed. And so she had to go back and her and I were talking, and she was like, yeah, you know what? So there's something personal with me with that label. And I said, I get it. People think it's a heavy label, but what if we just didn't call it emotionally disturbed? What if we didn't say it was ED? Maybe you have an emotional imbalance or something like that. And so when you take that away, but so she recognized that she had an emotional issue with that. Every time we had to test some kid for ED, she like, it was a fight every single time. So that was the overall for the thoughtfulness, is just respecting people's differences, understanding and trying to keep that balance is something that special ed teachers is super important in general, but it's really important for us. The knowledgeable piece was kind of a duh thing. Knowing the law, knowing policies, knowing your district policies, knowing state policies, and the big piece was knowing curriculum. Okay. And so they talked about knowing all the curriculum and then knowing all of your disabilities and what type of curriculum is for each type of disability and what's the appropriate strategy for each one. And so how intense that is and can be for special education teachers, and trying to be able to communicate that in an effective way through collaboration with your gen ed teachers, like how that is more complicated than most people realize, but at the same time also using that knowledge in a positive way and not trying to force your curriculum on somebody, and kind of recognizing, once again, going back to everybody's differences and their
you got to be very clever in how you go about trying to get that person to do what you want them to do.
Yes. Yeah, I don't want to use the term manipulate, but yeah. The third one was passionate or compassionate. And when I read this the first time, I didn't read it through all the way. And then when I was reading it again, I completely believe in compassion. And I think actually it's one of the most important pieces, but I don't agree with the way the author came off on it. He talked about like simulating disabilities with the teachers, blindfolding to simulate
visual impairments,
compassion to kids who are blind and stuff like that. Where for me, compassion is different. It's being really sensitive to the emotional needs of people, and knowing that. And I think it's harder for some people. I had an interesting conversation, but it's hard for people who have not struggled in their life to understand the struggles of a special ed student on a really deep level. And people who have had, as they say, like a cakewalk life where they really haven't struggled with anything, whether it's just emotional trauma or whatever. So I disagreed with the way they came across, but I do agree with compassion. And then the last piece was leadership, which it's almost that a SPED teacher in some cases, when they have to run RTI and SSD, almost have to take on a admin role without really being an admin. And so walking that fine line through collaboration of not being like above everybody else, but still kind of putting that out there so that you're on even playing field, even though you're having to do things that are more like of an admin duty in some ways. And that was broken down into 4 different pieces, but I know I'm running out of time. I think to me, the most interesting part was the leadership piece in this article, to be quite honest. Yeah, so.
Did it give like practical like advice for how to
like
kind
under
of
leadership?
Yeah.
It broke it down into communication skills and what type of communication skills and how to communicate well. Each one, face-to-face communication. Don't communicate through email. Don't communicate through written notes. It's a face-to-face, you build relationships. Then it went into organization, which that one was kind of like, duh, like you have to organize all of our paperwork, whatever. And then it talked about executive leadership, which was, to me, the most important piece, because it talks about that where you take on that admin role. And I didn't really realize, but my last principal actually did this without me really realizing what he was doing. But slowly having me take over SST, slowly having me take over RTI, slowly having me take over data, running all the programs that are the interventions for tier 2 and 3. I didn't really realize until I was reading this article. I'm like, holy crap, that's what Bill did for me. And working with the admin as like a collaborative team, but then also knowing how to still be, we're all on the team together and we're all equal players. So
Kimberly,
that, I
remind me,
like that part.
remind me again, is the focus of your annotated bibliography like roadblocks and challenges to collaboration in special education?
No.
Okay, no, you
It's not.
emailed me asking me if it was okay to do this assignment on a different topic. I recall now.
Okay, so maybe I'm confused. Is this the one that's supposed to be the annotated bibliography, the collaboration?
Oh no, well we're in 556 now, which is issues in special education.
Right.
Right. So the annotated bibliography can be about anything that you want it to be.
Did I just read the wrong paper?
It doesn't matter. I mean, this paper is appropriate for this class. That is a real issue in special education. You don't have to shake your head.
Oh my
It's
god.
totally valid.
I thought it was going over this one that was due today.
Oh yes, for the other class, 550.
Okay.
That's
No.
fine. This is a legitimate issue in special education, so you don't have anything to worry about.
My other article is actually about it's about the role of administration plays in, and actually it does tie into collaboration though too. The role that administration plays in special ed teachers leaving the field.
Okay, so yeah, another important issue. So no worries. Any thoughts, questions for Kimberly from the class?
Amy, you're laughing. You're like, oh great.
I was doing the same thing. I was going to do the article for the collaboration. So I'm like, wait a minute, let me switch to the other one.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, let me grab the other one.
I was not
Take your
the only
collab
one.
hat off and put your issues hat on.
Okay, hold on. Am I confused? Then were there two articles?
Well, there are two article review assignments. Yes, one for the issues course and one for the collaboration and consultation course.
And tonight's going to be on the issues.
Correct.
Okay, I got the right article now.
Oh shit.
Well, I love that article. Like I was saying, I almost went for that article for my collaboration article because it just breaks it down into what the needs are. I thought you did a great job.
Yeah. Thoughtfulness, knowledge, compassion, and leadership. Certainly.
What collaboration article?
What?
There's a self-selected article for collaboration and a self-selected article on issues as well.
Oh, I totally didn't do that assignment.
The self-selected article on issues is the one that we're going to put into our the 10 annotated bibliography.
Oh, I totally did the wrong assignment then for tonight.
Well, if you're going to be talking about collaboration, you technically didn't because, as I said to Kimberly.
Nope. I talked about assistive technology in the science classroom.
Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Well, sorry for the confusion. I did not anticipate there would be this much confusion, so my apologies.
I was all excited too.
Well, no, it's all good.
Done as well, but I won't talk about my other articles. I did both of them.
Yeah, no, it's fine. We'll hear about the other article when we hear about your annotated bibliography. So
okay.
We're good to go.
Well, I'll go next.
Now you know what you're doing, Amy.
I'll go next if it's all right. And I'm going to do it on the, let me see. Response to intervention is what my issue is that I wanted to do it on. And
so I read your paper, and
yes.
I'm curious, like, is it what issue specifically, or is it more just going to be kind of about RTI in general?
RTI in general, because I feel like RTI is a little bit of an issue in that some people they're doing it right. You know, if you don't do it correctly, it's helpful, but it doesn't give you as much information as if you do it correctly. And a lot of schools are not doing it correctly.
Okay.
And and I want to learn more about how to do it correctly because our school doesn't do it correctly. That's the reason why I wanted to do this. And my school is actually sending me to a training for RTI so that I can get more information about this, so that hopefully we can actually start doing this more correctly.
Yeah.
That's why I chose this.
Seems like a good goal to use an intervention correctly, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, because if you don't use it correctly, it's kind of moot.
Okay, so then
Are you going to the
take it
RTI
away,
in
Amy.
November then with me?
Yes, I'm going to that training in November. That's it's a statewide training at Salem,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it's supposed to help people, learn more about RTI. I wanted to do the next one too. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, but I'm going to try.
Why don't you go ahead and delve into the article?
Okay, so the article. Let me pull it out just a second. The article is, the author is Zirkel, Zirkel, and it was written in 2018, so it's really recent. It's called Response to Intervention and Child Find, a legally problematic intersection.
Okay.
And it starts by explaining, sorry, I'm gonna actually read the article as I go along because I was all prepared to talk about collaboration, so. This article talks about the legal issues around RTI and how it impacts the requirements associated with child find, which is also a requirement with IDEA. We're required to find them, and it talks about what child find is. And
refresh our memories.
well, basically, we're required to assess children who we think might be disabled and evaluate them. That's what child find is. RTI can help with identifying students. However, the main point of RTI is it's a way of providing a tiered service to all students, not just students with who might be disabled. So it's for all students, maybe to help them get higher and get up to grade level. Okay. So it's not just for special education, and then some school districts are using it more for that, but I think it needs to be used as a tool for all students.
Well, it's a proactive approach, right? I mentioned that in my comments in your paper.
Yes, absolutely.
With RTI, we don't wait. I mean, we observe what might be evidence of a disability or a learning, disability. But we're not waiting for like this discrepancy to get so huge that it's obvious. We're actively seeking these students out. I think that's important. It's a relatively new, novel approach in the field of special education. Traditionally, you wait until the child, until it's so obvious that there's something wrong, and then the referral's made, and the kid has already, missed out on important learning opportunities.
I did not know this though. It says that in IDEA that there's 3 options. There's to identify students, and they are to permit or prohibit severe discrepancy. I'm quoting here. Permit or require RTI, and there's also alternate research-based procedures that they allow. The first one, which is basically looking at patterns of strengths and weaknesses, which is what our district actually does use for identifying students with disabilities. That is the actual what we are using in our district. And we're looking at, I think the district is trying to go towards RTI, which is why they are wanting us to go to this training so that we could learn more about it, so that they can actually implement that as a means for identification as well. So I think that's what's happening in our district. It isn't official yet, but we're looking at possibly switching from strengths and weaknesses to RTI.
When you say patterns of strengths and weaknesses, are you talking about like, oh, well, like in reading, this kid's grade level is like 1 below where she should be, but in every other, academic subject, she's doing just fine. So we see this discrepancy in ability.
That's
just
exactly
kind of
what patterns of strengths and weaknesses is. Yes. So maybe they're really good at math, but they struggle with phonemic awareness and reading and being able to sound out words. And yes, so that's the idea. Sometimes that's difficult. You may have a hard time finding a strength, and so you have to really focus on that.
Can I say a thing? Because I've had 2 kids since I've been here not qualify for IEP services because they were low all across the board on everything.
Yep.
But they were high functioning so they were at like almost ID level, but they were very high functioning socially, and it had something to do with because they were so low across the board, but then high function, they didn't qualify.
This person isn't learning, but he's one heck of a conversationalist, so he's fine.
Sorry. Yeah. Like, oh no, she's fine. Like, oh my, like it was.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Emotional.
It was problematic. So
Yeah, that's
we
not
fixed
good.
it though.
It's often the opposite situation, right? Especially when you're dealing with a student with autism, like they often kind of slip under the radar because academically they do just fine, but it's the social part that's the challenge. So that's interesting.
My struggle has been
observe the other side of the coin, so to speak.
Yeah, because ED falls in that same category.
Yep.
And I've had 3 kids not identified because they're at grade level
with their reading and writing and math.
They have such a huge behavioral disorder. It's like, oh, they're fine. No, they're really not. And then what happens is by the time they get to 3rd grade, now their academics start slipping.
Yeah.
And then we waited all these years that we've, because we're following the RTI model. So
yeah, I think the RTI model might fix some of that.
Yeah.
Whereas the patterns of strengths and weaknesses, which is the model we're currently using, there's problems with that one.
Well, it seems much more subjective. RTI is a standardized, objective approach, right?
Yes.
So it'll definitely be more efficient.
The thing I like about RTI is you have all the students who are at the very bottom. Okay, the very bottom, who, they're the general ed, but then you've got that middle of the road. That's where RTI comes in. So you're dealing with those students in the middle and trying to either find out if you can get them back to grade level or if they need to go up to special education. And that's the thing I liked about it. We use DIBELS for our assessment. This article talks about looking at standardized assessments from the beginning of the year to determine whether or not we need to look at identifying students. So we look at DIBELS for reading, and then we have the iReady program for math, and those are our benchmark assessments that we use for the identification for RTI. So if they're at a certain percentile, which is usually below the 20th, we start looking at should we provide them that tier 2 service, and if then we have to providing them a certain amount of time at tier 2 service, then we then need to give them the next level up, which is assessing for special ed.
Right. So it's essentially a screening process, screening tool, RTI.
Yes, exactly. And using the benchmark assessments for RTI as a way of keeping track. The one thing that this article did talk about that I thought was interesting is that it talks about litigation, and that in most cases involving RTI and special education eligibility, referrals resulted in the district usually winning the cases. The only time it didn't is when the parents were left out of the final decision-making process. We've got to make sure we include them in that for eligibility. Because
that's one of the parental rights to IDEA affords.
Yes. And that's the only time that RTI has been found to be a problem, is if the district is not keeping parents in the loop. Otherwise,
so in these other rulings where the court sided with the district, now were these parents contesting?
They were contesting something about how why it took so long for them to identify their child. RTI does take time. It does, but if we're doing it correctly and we are giving a certain amount of time, then saying, okay, we're going to assess at this point if they still haven't made progress, then we're doing the right thing. As long as you keep the parents in the loop. That was one thing the article did point out, and I thought that was pretty important. So finally, the article concluded that it's not an absolute requirement to use RTI. It's just a really good tool if your district decides to use it. For example, our district's using the other one, strengths and weaknesses. That's a legitimate way to identify. But just a second. All students should be treated based on their individual needs and differences. If we look at all children as the same, then we are not helping students to learn. And the IEP stresses that it is an individualized plan, and it's important. We should always be to that, and should always be considered when looking at special education. And finally, to make sure we include parents, so keeping parents in the loop. And then I just talked about how it was important to me because our district is looking at different ways of doing this. I know I'm out of time, but I found it to be very helpful, and I'm thinking I'm going to have a lot of articles with RTI and ways to do it correctly, and I think this is going to be a good thing for me.
Yeah, you know, I would try to find papers that are pro RTI and papers that are against RTI, right? People who are critical on it, and then those who, you know, stand by it. Like the Vaughn and Swanson article was an example of proponents of RTI, certainly. And you know, you might look at the reference list of that article and see what other RTI articles, you know, do they cite. That's always a good place to look. If you find a good paper, just look at who those authors cited in the writing of that paper, and then you really kind of get into the wormhole, so to speak.
That's a great idea.
But no, I think, yeah, like with any intervention, you know, it can be effective provided that it's used appropriately. And, you know, these kinds of evidence-based practices are often used inappropriately for various reasons. Maybe it's lack of understanding, maybe it's lack of resources, maybe it's, you know, a matter of, you know, teachers kind of picking and choosing parts from different interventions that they like and, you know, that in the past have worked for them and kind of cobbling together their own, you know, procedure, as it were, or instructional approach. And, you know, if a practice is evidence-based, you know, it's supported by research, well, then you can't just start deconstructing it and kind of tweaking things your own way. Then you're not using it as it was, you know, used to provide this evidence, or it was used to generate this evidence, right?
Yeah.
Its effectiveness. So yeah, no, I think it's definitely going to be a topic that will be, you know, very easy to find 10 papers on. So, any thoughts or comments from you all? Okay. Nothing. She covered it all. Comprehensive.
Well, okay, so the only issue that I have with RTI, and I've been using it for the last 3 years. Our building started a couple of years ago. The only issue that I have with RTI is the whole wait 6 weeks, try another intervention. And one of the things, and I think it was in one of the other articles, maybe it was the Vaughn or the Kaufman one, and my response was, well, that's all fine and great. One of the things, because I'm a data person, like I love data, like a little too much probably. One of the problems that I run up against, and it comes down to usually the school psychs who come in, because we don't have one at our school full time, we only get her twice a month, is not knowing that student. And sometimes we'll be tracking over time, and then like they'll change grade levels or whatever happens. But even like, great, okay, I'm going to try this intervention, but sometimes, and it says clearly, one of the last things is RTI should not be the end all and be all. You do not need to go through every level of RTI in order to qualify our kid for SPED. If you truly think someone is SPED, you should just go to the testing. I mean, you shouldn't just go to it, but you look at the past data and you go to that testing spot.
And there are some students, it even says that.
I think that's a hard mindset for some of our school psychs who want this huge amount of data.
They want to follow the procedure like with such accuracy that it kind of blinds you to obvious, you know, indicators of the fact that, well, maybe we don't have to go through the whole process, because this kid, you know, not only is this data that we're getting from the RTI intervention suggesting something's up, but we have this other pieces of evidence as well.
Right, like the classroom teacher, and I mean, I don't know. So,
well, in some students, it's very obvious that they are a SPED student. I mean, why delay the process because you have to do this specific RTI? It even says was it the Vaughn article that delaying was a problem? I forget which one it was, but it says
the Vaughn and Swanson paper,
you can identify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's
right now in my school, who it's obvious we need to do some testing because of what's going on with this student, and why make him do this whole RTI thing when it's obvious. It's
certainly most appropriate for like these very kind of subtle borderline cases,
right?
For kind of teasing those out, so we're not misdiagnosing,
right?
Misreferring students who are indeed experiencing challenges due to a lack of effective instruction. Nothing inherent to that individual, so to speak. Cool. Okay. Well then, thank you, Amy, and thank you, Kimberly. Jessica, Rowan.
I'll go next.
Okay. It'll be a nice transition, Rowan. I liked your paper, and that it was like, well, I'll let you get into it, but it's related.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to go next.
Okay. Nice to see the chance.
Right, so my article is called Promoting Successful Transitions, What We Can Learn from RTI to Enhance Outcome for All, or what can we learn from RTI to enhance outcomes for all students. So it's talking at the beginning. It spoke to me about the fact that obviously students who are in SPED have mandated transitions, and those who are covered by RTI or not also sometimes struggle with transitions after high school. And so it was an article that was looking at how we can promote positive post-secondary outcomes for everyone, not just the students that are covered by the mandate because they're in SPED. It spoke at the beginning about how difficult it is for lots of students to achieve a positive outcome after high school, whether they've got disabilities or not, and about the importance of teaching more life skills and coordinating efforts to better prepare all students for time after those supports at school disappear.
Right. Academics is not necessarily the route that everyone should be taking. I mean, I think we are, it's so important in our society, right? Kind of focusing on the academics, but for a lot of students, like, maybe we should be, diverting our energies in a different direction. There are more kind of practical skills that we could be teaching that are going to better prepare any young adults.
So what it talked about in the rest of the article was using this principle of the 3-tier RTI approach as a model, not to replace the mandated transition services, but rather to work alongside those services and therefore cover all students. So to implement into classrooms sort of transition services or transition support from a much younger age. Mm-hmm. So the first thing they talked about was beginning early, exposing, so like a tier 1 would be exposing students to work and non-work opportunities as young as elementary school.
Right, it's called like career awareness. Like just starting to think about, well, what kind of jobs are there? I mean, in this day and age, there are many different types of jobs. It's not even the case that this traditional kind of desirable outcome of, a career kind of within a single field is the most realistic one. We have like the gig economy. People kind of cobble together their salaries now doing various different things. And so, I think that's certainly important today. So very timely.
Even, I mean, it didn't mention it in the article, but I was thinking about it afterwards. Just simple things like last year at my kids' school in 3rd grade, they had just parents coming in and presenting to them about what the different types of jobs that they did. My 2nd grader is going on a field trip to look at next week, to look at all the different types of work that they do at the Humane Society. So yeah, starting them young and exposing them to different things that happen in the community.
Okay.
And then there was a suggestion about having a portfolio that goes with them of career exploration. So some kind of thing that they keep with them if they go to a different school. And then as they get older, the tiers went up to giving exposure to work or intern experiences, setting up mentorship programs with successful school leavers. So getting your freshly graduated, after they've done a year after high school, getting them to come back and talk to your 9th graders or something about their experiences after they leave high school. And then the second one was about self-determination. So again, starting self-determination skills, teaching them, because they need to be taught early in elementary school again, and then carrying that right the way through to adulthood. So in the tier 1 was things that people do in the classrooms. So having the students take accountability, share responsibility for running parts of the classroom, giving each student a weekly job, and then just continuing to provide that right the way through elementary and middle school, so that they can model being a self-advocate and a responsible teenager and then adult. And then the third one was looking at the role of technology. Firstly, in the first tier was for staff to just handle all the data involved. But secondly, teaching students to use it as both a method of exploring careers and interests, just looking up what might be involved in different careers, but also teaching them to use adaptive equipment for time management and scheduling, so that they know when they have to start getting ready for a lecture or when they have to start getting ready for work, and setting up calendars so that they can be good self-managers and self-advocates as adults.
Developing executive function abilities.
Yeah. So yeah, it really, I mean, I work a lot with seniors at the moment, and I see them panicking and struggling about what they're going to do next year, whether they should go to community college or what it is they want to do. And it really spoke to me a lot. And you can see the students that have had preparation as younger students, and you can also spot the ones that are a little bit lost right now.
Yeah, I think it comes down to certainly kind of personality factors and kind of unique, characteristics of a student, but also what is their kind of exposure to this in the family life? Like, what do their parents do?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an important component. But I really like the idea of the this idea of the binder that's like developed early and kind of sticks with the child and follows the student through, his secondary career. There's actually an article. I just want to share this with my screen with you real quick. Of this approach used. Are you guys seeing this effectiveness of the career path binder project? The authors are Hurlbut and Handler, and they do basically just what you were talking about there, Rowan. This career path binder project, in which
Erin, do you have it in your hand there?
What's that?
I think Erin has it in her hand.
Oh yeah, Erin's got it. There it is. Excellent. So not only under exploring kind of what are we differentiate between the hard skills and the soft skills of a job, right? Hard skills being just like, what are the tasks that I have to be able to do? Like for me, I need to know how to use Zoom. I need to know how to use Canvas, right? Those are hard skills for my job. But more importantly, the soft skills. What are like the interpersonal demands of the workplace, you know? I mean, I think oftentimes we think about a job that we would like to do based just on kind of what would the tasks, what tasks would I be required to complete? And not kind of this whole other picture, which is often the bigger picture. What are my interactions with my coworkers going to look like? You know, what am I going to be sitting at a desk all day? You know, am I going to be moving around a lot? And so it's a nice paper. And if you're considering kind of looking at this, for the bibliography, it might be a good one for you to look at.
Well, what was the name of the paper again? I feel like I wrote a paper in our transition class on it. What was it called again?
Promoting successful transitions. What can we learn from RTI to enhance outcomes for all students?
Successful. Is that okay? Let me see.
I think I did too, Jessica.
We did one that was similar, and I remember it and being like, oh, it was like, I felt it was really super helpful. Like, it gave a lot of really, I like it when articles actually give concrete things you can do.
Yeah.
Not just their findings, but they say,
that are like,
here are some things that you can actually do.
Yeah. Yeah, like, great. I love numbers and percentages. Fabulous. But great. Now what do I do with them?
Yeah. How do I
Kids
translate
laughing.
this into the real world?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, certainly a timely area in special education transition. And as you mentioned, Rowan, not just in special education, for students also without disabilities. So again, it's going to be an area that you're going to have so many papers to choose from. That might be your challenge. Which ones do you want to use? And then, maybe you narrow it down and you just focus on like one kind of disability group. I mean, that might be an option. Or
I think I was going to just focus on autism mainly.
Yeah.
I've made a list.
I got a big old binder full of papers. If you're ever in LeGrand, stop by. I'll let you borrow it. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing, Rowan. Welcome, Elaine. I saw that you popped in.
Hi.
We're just talking about the self-selected article assignment for the issues class.
Right.
We had some confusion about what class we're talking about, so I just wanted to make sure. And even if you haven't turned it in yet, that's fine. You can just kind of share your thoughts if you've read the article, if you have it there with you.
Yes.
So
I do.
So I'm not volunteering you to go next already by any means.
I would love to. I would love to get it over with. So I'm good. Okay.
The
issue that I chose was and I apologize for coming late. I just get off work and come straight here. There's a time change now that I'm in Alaska, so it's a little rugged. But anyway, I'm glad to be here. And Rowan, I do have a question for you. What was the first word in that article? The first word in the title?
Promoting.
Promoting. Okay.
Promoting successful transitions.
Okay. Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
You talked about assisted technology for students to know what time to do this and that. Do you know of any good technology for that? Any kind of assisted technology that I could get a hold of for a student that I have? Did it give any actual names?
I'll look at it again. I did not write it down in my summary, but I will look at the article again and I will email you.
So Elaine, you're just looking for some kind of technology that will help a student like with time management?
Yes. Okay.
Maybe like a Google Calendar or something might be useful.
Well, he's not a self-starter. He doesn't know he's supposed to do the next thing. So, okay. I chose an issue that I'm dealing with. Okay. And I know that it can be a common issue. And that is, the title of my article is Accomplishing More Together, Influences to the Quality of Professional Relationships Between Special Educators and Paraprofessionals.
Okay.
And I've been in 2 settings with paraprofessionals, and both have been unique, but they both been difficult.
Okay.
And so I'm learning a lot as I go. But that's one thing you were talking a few minutes about, when you go to school and you decide a career, you don't really think about the soft skills that you need to know as much. I think that when I decided to go into special ed, I didn't think about managing 7 aides, and that's a full-time career in itself. And there's a lot of conflicting personalities, and so that's been a struggle for me to figure out how to deal with that. So this article was very interesting. It was research done on 42 teachers and paraprofessionals, and so they made up 9 teams. I think they came from 3 schools, which it would have been good to have more, but that's a start. And they interviewed them and asked them questions like, well, basically what it came down to is they had 5 areas of influence that they determined from talking to all of them. And the areas of influence were teacher influence, paraprofessional influence, administrative influence, shared influences, and underlying influences. And what I got, the gist of it was basically everything that I see. The paraprofessionals want the teachers to give more, and teachers would like paraprofessionals to give more. And one of the questions was, what do you feel it makes a big difference in your day? And they all said, at least in one context or another, that professionalism was really important. But the teachers were talking about the paraprofessionals, and the paras were talking about the teachers. No one looked at themselves, examined themselves on being professional. They also said that coming into a job as a new teacher with paras that were already working there, it was really intimidating and difficult. And although that was a situation I was in last year, I had 3 paras in their 50s that had worked for the school district as paras for 28 years. And this was my first year. So I wasn't really sure how to go into it, you know, if I should act real assertive and strong like I knew everything, or if I should be open about, well, I don't know much. And that issue was brought up, that was an issue between paras and teachers. Paras expected a lot from the teachers. And if they didn't come in really knowing what they were doing, the paras were disappointed and didn't have confidence in the teachers. And that's got to be a problem when you're on your own as a first-year SPED teacher. And on the other hand, the teachers felt like the paras who were coming in new needed to take more initiative and research what disabilities the students they were working with had, and become more interested and professional. And that was basically the gist of all these pages. And so at the end, it
all of these
talks
different
about
types of influences. And so these are influences on like the relationship between paras.
Yes, the relationship. Absolutely. Yes. The relationship. Thank you.
You mentioned underlying. You mentioned underlying influences. What was their definition of an underlying influence?
Okay, the underlying influences were novice teachers coming in, being nervous and unsure of themselves, and they needed to be providing supervision, delegating responsibilities, addressing conflicts, and collaborating with the paraprofessionals. And that was something, and also administrative influences that the teacher couldn't change. Like the teacher couldn't go talk to the administrator and say these paras need more training, or they need higher pay, or whatever motivates them. They had no control over those issues. And I have seen that some paras look at the hierarchy as being the pay scale and the level of education that the teacher comes in with. And others don't consider that at all. They consider the knowledge and the expertise. So that changes. In the situation I was in last year, I had, like I said, older paras that had taught for a long time in that situation. This year, I have native paras that most of them are brand new. I have one that's been there for 10 years, and she wants to run the class. And that was another issue that came up in this article, that if they had a lot of experience, how do you keep them from thinking they're in charge when you come in new?
Right.
And that's been a little bit of a struggle.
A tough line to walk. But guess what it comes down to is
Yeah.
that, well, what is your title and what is my title? And you know, you don't want to get that black and white, but I mean, it's like, that's what it comes down to. You are
It's true.
the classroom aide and I'm the teacher, but I value your experience and we need to work together, you know?
Right, exactly. And that's what the parents and the teachers both said in this interview situation, that having distinct roles was really important to them. Mm-hmm. And it was important that as the parents came in, no matter whether the teacher had experience or not, that they were able to be very explicit in their instructions of what the expectations were, and training. So the parents want to be trained, they want to be told what to do, they want to be told how to do it, so they feel like they're doing it correctly. Right. And so that's an issue. Make sure that you're prepared and know something that you're going to tell them. One of my issues that was not brought up in the article was scheduling. How do you schedule 20 students, 6, and the situation I'm in, I'm also, I'm covering elementary and high school. Okay. So I've got 20 students and 6 are intensive. So I have 7 aides and myself covering all this. Mm-hmm. And everyone had a different idea of what the scheduling should be, but I think I've really got it down. We're getting together and we're collaborating, and the article didn't give any steps on what to do. It's like you said previously with Rowan, that it's nice to have concrete information at the end of the research to find out what to do with it. But I've done a lot of research on my own and I've come up with ideas, and basically I've learned, even though this kind of alludes to it, make the parents feel important and show that you appreciate them, and a lot of it has to do with personality and whether you click or not. Yeah, unfortunately, that's often what it comes down to. You can't really change some people.
Can I add something to that? Can I add something to that? Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to have team building activities with your paraprofessionals, because that helps to create relationships which will be more conducive in a working environment as well. So, and not just, I mean, you could even maybe just go out and everyone, let's just go out and have a little afternoon coffee. I don't care. Just do something as a team that doesn't even have to be at the school, because it can help to build those relationships, which I've worked both as a paraprofessional and as a teacher working with paraprofessionals, and from both sides. And both times I've done that, I feel like that's really key. Yeah. Developing relationships. That's what it seems to boil down to. Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. Go for something stronger than coffee, though.
Well, then maybe it's not in the afternoon.
Yes.
No, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. I'm just saying.
Well, I found it to be interesting, but the thing that I liked about the article was it did validate my feelings, and it wasn't just me being insecure. It was that this is kind of a universal thing, and they don't prepare us in school with how to manage a team, and some people have had that in sports, and I think that's kind of how I went in it, is we are a team and I'm the captain, but you're all important players, and that has helped since I've done that. But they're asking at the end of this article, should there be more emphasis placed in education and pre-service teachers learning how to manage and team build and that kind of thing? And I think, yes, that would be helpful, because you don't think about that you're going to be spending 50% of your time managing a team that needs to get along and needs to be positive in order to be positive with the students. Mm-hmm. And that's my article.
Well, good. Again, I mean, it sounds like, what does it sound like? It is certainly an important issue. And, you know, are you going to focus specifically on like the teacher paraprofessional dynamic, or for the annotated bibliography?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Good.
Yes, I found a lot of good articles that go along with this. Yes.
Good.
So I'm
I
excited.
don't know if you heard the advice that I gave to Amy earlier, but always a good place to start is to look at the reference page of the article that you have in your hand, because you're going to find a whole bunch of words that are relevant and on the topic. So
there's 2 pages or 3 pages of reference.
Okay, perfect.
That gives me a lot to go on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's
Jared,
yeah.
Can I ask a quick question before you have somebody else go?
Oh yes, Kimberly.
Okay, so, and this is in regards to Canvas, and I think this is why I got confused, is that on Canvas, the collaboration article is due tonight, October 30th, but the trends issue is due November 1st. Am I right in that? Still,
Yes. So I have you talking about a paper that isn't technically due yet.
Okay, I think that's where I got confused, because I did both of them and I was like, oh, it's due today. So, okay, I just wanted to make sure that like I had that, because I was like, oh, right, maybe I didn't. Okay, just checking. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, a detail that I overlooked, and which, now that it's brought to my attention, is very confusing. So thank you for that, and I apologize. But before we go, so we've got Aaron and we've got Jessica still to go. It's 10 after. Do we just want to push through and finish a bit earlier, or do we want to take a break right now?
Yes, please.
Push through?
Push through.
I'm game too.
I'll go.
Okay, Aaron, go. So what are you going to talk to us about today?
Okay, so just so I am clear, the collaboration article is due tonight.
So again, we're talking a lot about due dates, but I like lifted the restrictions for the due dates because, you know, very early on, I think it was Kimberly who brought up a very valid point that, you know, sometimes we're very busy and sometimes we have more free time. So it's like nice to get ahead and get things turned in.
Right.
So technically, as long as the assignments are turned in by the end of the term.
Okay, because I'm just looking.
You will still get notifications from Canvas. Those are good reminders, but you will not receive point deductions if you go beyond those due dates.
Okay, because I'm just looking at it and it says October 30th. It's when it is, as long as it's available for 550.
You can still turn it. You can still turn it in.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, then I did do the right thing tonight.
Good. Good.
Okay, so I'm focusing on technology for my annotated bibliography assignment.
Okay.
And I am not the best at just summarizing, so I'm just going to read you my article. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And I apologize if I start coughing while I'm going. Here we go. So the article is called Assistive Technology in the Inclusive Science Classroom.
Okay.
And it is by, I don't have their first names written down, by Sandy Watson and Linda Johnston with a T.
Okay. And is it a fairly recent article?
I'm trying to remember. Yes, it is. Well, not too recent. It's from 2007, so it's not super recent, but the information is fairly recent. The way they talk about it is quite usable. Good. It's from The Science Teacher.
Okay.
Sounds super professional.
The Science Teacher.
The Science Teacher, like the Ohio State.
That's it. The only one.
Okay. So students with disabilities can benefit from the use of assistive technology in the mainstream science classroom. Assistive technology is categorized into 3 levels of aid. No technology, where no aids are required. Light technology is easily accessible with adaptations that teachers can provide. And high technology, which is computer access and other electronic devices. These devices range from a color overlay to word processing applications on an iPad or a simple pencil grip. There are 7 major areas of instruction that technology has proven to be the most useful to students with mild disabilities: organization, note-taking, writing assistance, productivity, access to reference materials, cognitive assistance, materials creation, and modification. Organization skills can be difficult to overcome for students with disabilities. However, using light tech strategies such as graphic organizers and outlines can help students sort their thoughts. There are various brands of computer software, including Microsoft Word, that are considered high-tech strategies that show students how to organize their work. The second area of instruction where students struggle is with note-taking. Students can use light technology such as outlines or other charts that are provided by the teacher to help with their note-taking strategies during their science class. If necessary, they can use tape or digital recorders to record lectures for later transcription. Organization and note-taking are key parts of participating in class, and having both low and high-tech solutions make the participation that much more successful for students with disabilities. When students have difficulty with their writing, both high and light tech options should be made available to students with disabilities. Light tech capabilities would include students working together to collaborate on assignments, or a high-tech program such as BoardMaker to translate words into visual icons. Students with disabilities can benefit from the use of personal digital assistants to help with their handwriting, having access to calculators, text-to-speech programs, and computer-assisted instruction, which are all forms of high-tech productivity solutions. The use of a science notebook with pre-designed templates to write lab reports or to record hypotheses is an example of light technology. When students have access to science reference materials, they're better able to understand the curriculum. Many software or internet-based materials make teaching science easier, and it allows students with disabilities to often access the high technology at their own pace, allowing students to do projects that enhance students' long and short-term memory of complex science concepts and processes. I totally lost my place. Enhance students' long and short-term memory of complex science concepts and processes. Through the use of highlighting, templates, and outlines, rubrics, students will understand what is expected on a science project. The last area of instruction where assistive technology has proven to be successful is materials creation and modification. Students that are hearing or visually impaired can gain more independence in the classroom through the use of textured lab materials, hand lenses, and captioned computer software. Light and high-tech assistive technology is readily available to students, but the critical need comes with finding the appropriate funding for these devices. Many of the light tech solutions are easy to come by. However, as the authors state, funding for high-tech devices can come through the school system, the insurance provider, or civic organizations. Funding is the hardest part of education. However, ensuring that students with disabilities are receiving adequate strategies in the classroom is imperative. I've had experience working with students using several kinds of technology, both light and high. As a teacher, I've created many outlines, templates, and have worked with students to identify which types of light technology works best for them. Having a variety of modified materials allows students to understand that in science, tools can often be simplified or be manipulated to help them. In the one district that I substitute most frequently, the entire science curriculum is online, and while it's easier for the teacher because the planning is already completed, the students with disabilities often struggle with this high technology. The lessons are fast-paced and do not allow for much modification unless the teacher has done the extra work. The classes use a science notebook for notes, making claims, vocabulary, etc., but if the student struggles to keep up, they end up getting further behind in the curriculum. There have been multiple students that I have worked with using augmented and assistive communication devices, and they have always been extremely helpful for the student. And these devices can be helpful in the science classroom as students are able to express themselves and are able to participate on a much grander scale. But as a teacher or even as a substitute, I have often found them to be hindering. Flipping through pictures to find words or being unaware of how a device works is difficult, especially if training hasn't occurred. I absolutely agree with the authors that technology is needed in the science classroom and students benefit from the use of technology when it's used appropriately. I also agree that students need to be given more time or need to be given I don't know what I was writing. Also need to be given more and they should not have to fight for the technological strategies that work for them. I cannot understand, though, why funding would ever be an issue for special education. It doesn't seem fair to me that students with disabilities should have to jump through extra financial hoops in order to access the science curriculum that is being offered to their peers in the mainstream classroom.
Okay.
There you go. Sorry, I'm terrible at summarizing on the spot.
Well, reading the paper was an option, so that's totally fine.
Yes.
You know, I'd be curious, like, you know, this article's from 2007, you said?
Mm-hmm, but it's so relevant right now.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that, like, how many iterations of the iPhone have come out since 2007? And, like, the number of, like, educational apps that are out there? Like I would
Right?
bet that like there's a lot
There's
that is
more.
much more cost effective, right? I mean, we
There's
still want
more.
funding, but there's certainly more readily available technology that could be supportive that is more cost, you know, it's not as expensive.
Right. And I've never though stepped foot into a science classroom where there has been a textured beaker, or a teacher has taken a meter stick and has put staples in it to identify inch marks. And that was mentioned in this article.
Okay.
Never once. And I have been in dozens and dozens of science classrooms, and they've never done that. I'm like, I want to take this article back to all of my colleagues and say, hey, did you ever think about doing this?
I think that's just the thing. Some people don't think about it on their own, and they don't really have the motivation, or maybe the, you know, the desire, or the job of like they're doing the research and finding these, you know, different kind of, especially the light technology examples that you mentioned. These are all things that can be done very easily.
Yeah, they're very simple. They're very, very simple things to accomplish, but they just don't take the time because it's an extra 5 minutes to do it. But there are so many of there's so many extra gen ed peers that could benefit from them also, that it's like, why should I take my time to stop and do that when I could just barrel on through my lesson?
Right. Do what I've always done, and that works for like 80% of the people, and that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I have one colleague that's that way. This is the way it's always been. This is the way it always will be, and I'm never changing it. And when you try and approach him about changing something, he's just like, no, done. This is the way it is. I'm not changing it. And when you say something about it, it's like, no. Even the thought of changing it isn't enough. It's a tradition. It's not an option to change. Yeah.
Do you all have any thoughts about technology? I think definitely, Erin, it's an important topic to be researching, and you know, you're going to have no problem finding the resources that you need to complete the bibliography.
It was the first one I found, and I mean, it caught my eye right away, and I have found multiple others. I think I'm up to like 7 now.
Great.
In my hunt for articles, and several of them are much more current. So I'm more interested in like things like Boardmaker. Like I love Boardmaker. I think that's the coolest.
Right.
But,
so it's considered light technology?
No, that would be more high technology, because it's computer.
Using Boardmaker.
And Boardmaker would
generate a visual lexicon. Is it considered high technology for the student to use it?
High technology for the student to use it?
Yeah. Or is it a form of light technology?
It would be high technology for the teacher to use it, though, too, if it's computer assisted.
Right.
If it's readily available for the teacher, you know, like the pencil grip or a template, it would be light technology.
Got it.
Or low technology.
Okay. Sorry, did I cut someone off? Oh, Amy, yes.
Can I just comment also that if you're going to write into the IEPs that they're going to need to have, let's say, speech to text or something like that, you need to be giving them opportunities to practice with that technology, because the assessments that are required are all computerized.
Yep.
Of course, you can print it and then do those kind of things, but like Read Live offers a way to teach a kid how to use a scribe appropriately. There's just so many you could use Google, drawing a blank, but basically where you're speaking into the computer and the student can say what they're thinking for writing, which is going to be a requirement for a state assessment. I mean, you've got to give them those tools, and if you don't have them for them to practice with, then you can't write them into the IEP.
Right.
Which boils down to funding.
Yeah, I had speech to text. I had a long-term position when state assessments were happening, and speech to text was the number one accommodation that we were using. And we have to use this, we have to use this, we have to use this, but we never gave the option to practice, ever. I'm just like, now I'm sitting back and thinking, we were such a disservice to these children, such a disservice. But
there's this great thing that will potentially help you learn, but we don't have the time to teach you how to use it properly.
We're not giving it to you. Sorry.
You can use a scribe. A scribe is basically they're talking and you have to type exactly what they say, including they have to tell you capital A, you know, and then the period and comma. They have to use all that, but you have to teach them that too.
Right.
So if they don't, let's say, for example, they have a huge speech impediment and understanding them, speech to text is not going to work.
No.
That's when you'd use a scribe or something else, but you've got to give them those tools.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
The scribe can be painfully time consuming, but in the long run, it may end up being the most useful. But
all right. Well, thank you, Erin.
Yep.
And so Jessica is there.
Yep. Hi.
You're eager to take the stage.
I'm here. So I was on the article confusion train. And however, my article I chose in the collaboration, it could also easily fit in the topic I'm choosing for my other one, which is transition stuff. So
outstanding.
You know, it's about collaboration in transition. So here we go.
Okay.
All right. So I have it on my other computer here. So what the title of it is a survey of vocational rehabilitation counselors and special education teachers on collaboration in transition planning. It's a mouthful.
Yes. So, I enjoyed the paper.
Huh?
You wrote about it and I read it today.
Oh yeah. Hey. Yeah, so what it is, you know, basically there's been a lot of studies that have said one of the main variables in having, you know, successful post-secondary outcomes, whether that's going to school, going to work, whatever, is having interagency collaboration. So this one focuses on special education teachers, transition teachers, and voc rehab counselors. So even though those findings have been done, a lot of time what actually happens is that there's the collaboration is really inconsistent or limited or to completely non-existent. So it was kind of looking at why, right? Why is this the case? If it's been proven time and time again that this is so helpful, why is this not happening in real life? So what they did was they conducted a survey, and it was given to several voc rehab counselors and special education teachers in Maryland, Florida, Utah, and Oregon, and they had some reason behind it, but whatever.
Representativeness of the sample?
Yeah, for their sample.
Yeah, they wanted a variety of states.
Variety of states everywhere. It had something else to do as well, but so what they wanted to do was they wanted to determine the causes of the discrepancies, why they continue to persist, and then to offer recommendations for future improvement in that area. So the first thing they did was they wanted to identify like what the roles of each person was, how often they're involved with this process, and their satisfaction with voc rehab counselor participation in the transition process. And so kind of one of the first things they said was really interesting was that when special education teachers were asked if VR counselors were viewed as integral, the median response for yes was about 60%. Okay. And then, but when they came to Oregon, Oregon actually ranked the lowest.
Okay.
In special education teachers saying
Oregon
And
special education teachers don't think that voc rehab counselors are important.
yeah,
Not as important as other states.
not as important. I mean, it was 57% of teachers responded yes, which is half, which is
Yeah.
was pretty far below the average. And then when voc rehab counselors were asked the same question, the median rate response for if they feel they're important, 94% said yes, which makes sense. But again, Oregon came in last, again, with only 88% of voc rehab counselors saying that they were with that. So I thought that was interesting.
So that question asked voc rehab counselors, do they feel that they are important or integral to the transition process?
Planning process, yeah.
Okay. So SPED teachers, do you think the voc rehab people are important? And voc rehab people, do you think you're important?
To the transition planning process. So
right.
like I think they're talking about specifically like working with an IEP team.
Okay.
You know, doing that, not just working in transition.
Got it.
So yeah. So the top perceived barriers was that they said it was lack of sufficient personnel, limited availability, and a high turnover rate for voc rehab counselors was kind of what was said across the board.
That was a roadblock put in the road by voc rehab counselors or SPED teachers?
So it was both, through voc rehab counselors, kind of like lack of sufficient personnel, limited availability, and high turnover rate. That was what special education teachers and voc rehab said. That's what gets in the way of them being more involved in the process. Okay. And then how often it happens, I found this really interesting. So 32% of SPED teachers said that the voc rehab counselors were invited to IEPs at least annually. Okay. But then 32% of voc rehab counselors said that they were invited to IEP meetings at least weekly.
Okay.
Does that
well, I know the answer because I read your paper.
Oh yeah, you know the answer. I thought this is crazy, and it's because it had to do with caseloads. Because voc rehab counselors have like 100 on average, like the median caseload is 100.
Right.
And the median caseload for SPED teachers was 16, which I wish my caseload was 16, but like times 2.
Yeah, but, one wonders. I mean, well, one doesn't wonder. I think we have a pretty good idea why there might be so much turnover in voc rehab.
Right. Yeah.
We have a caseload of 100 people, and I imagine that the voc rehab salary is not, you don't get in the lap of luxury.
No, you're not. You're not buying a new Tesla. That salary. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then with satisfaction of their like involvement, the voc rehab counselors showed a higher rate of satisfaction than the SPED teachers were not really satisfied, but the voc rehab counselors were pretty satisfied. So that was kind of the beginning, like just temperature taking.
Okay.
So then the second goal was to, they wanted to determine the importance and feasibility, and they kind of listed 14 different collaboration practices. And so the voc rehab counselors and SPED teachers kind of agreed on the top 2. They both said the same thing. Okay. The number 1 for both was providing training for SPED teachers on the transition process, including specific information about access to voc rehab. Which, yep, I would go to that training.
Yeah. I would go to it too.
Yeah. And then the second one was providing training to transition teachers on preparing students with key knowledge and skills. So for example, self-determination, student involvement, family involvement, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But most of the other ratings showed a pretty close correspondence.
Oh, are you there? Oh, I think we might have lost her. Did you guys see that warning that her bandwidth was low?
And it was almost like, oh, hello, am I here?
Now you're here.
Okay.
But I'm getting a warning that your bandwidth is low.
Yeah, I just said I'm unstable.
Okay.
I agree. Wednesdays are really long days for me. You're catching me at the end. I'm a little kooky. I'm so tired. All right.
You're close. You got 3 more minutes.
I'm there. Okay. Same two practices. They were ranked this high importance and feasibility. It was pretty much a straight line across. Like the most important ones that they liked were also the easiest. And then it went on to talking about the what would be most valuable in the future. And some of the stuff they mentioned was offering joint training that's attended by SPED teachers, transition teachers, and VR counselors working together. Mm-hmm. And then training for transition teachers on the transition process, that including specific information about voc rehab, and that was pretty much it. So when I got done reading this study, it just kind of confirmed what I already knew. Right. I would love for voc rehab to be more involved with a lot of my students, but it's just a lack of me kind of knowing how to access them. I know that their caseloads are huge, that the turnover is crazy. So the second I get a contact,
right, it changes,
and like, who's this person? They don't know me. We don't have a relationship at all. And so like, if I had the chance to go to a training like with them and, on the same thing and collaborate and talk, that would build that relationship and then hopefully help my kids as a result. And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just kind of, it's important, but there's a lot of barriers that have a lot of layers.
Yeah, no, one of these issues that is clearly an issue, and both sides seem to be well aware of the fact that everyone would benefit from collaboration, but just doesn't happen. Right? It's like,
yeah, like time, funding, all that stuff was another thing that came up a lot too.
Yeah, money and time will get in the way often. Well, I think it's an important topic. It certainly has to do, it kind of incorporates a variety of issues into one. Kind of, barriers to collaboration or interagency collaboration, funding, transition. So I think that's positive. Any thoughts from you all? Maybe we're all getting a little tired. Our Wednesdays have been long ones. Okay. Well, that's all that I had. Thank you all for sharing. And, as always, I'm available. If questions come up as you start diving into the bibliographies. If you hit any roadblocks, let me know. We can, oh, that was the timer. But anyway, so I guess I'll just stop talking there. We're all tired. It's been a long day, and I will see you all. Oh, Amy's got a question.
It's a question. Can I chat with you before you hang up this meeting, just because you had sent an email about doing those.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I will not hang up.
Thank you.
Okay. But everyone else is free to hang up now if they so choose. See you, Elaine, Rowan. We'll see you next week. Erin, we'll see you next week. And
have a fun Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
But was she asking? Was Jared? Was she asking a question about the observation thing?
Yes, that's what I meant.
Okay. Can